This is Land of Havilah, Matthew 15. Coming up, some scribes and Pharisees came at least 70 miles from Jerusalem to Galilee to investigate Jesus. They asked him why his disciples didn't wash before eating. The Gospel of Mark explains the background of the question, that, quote, "The Pharisees and all the Jews don't eat unless they wash their hands and forearms, holding to the tradition of the elders. And there are many other things which they hold to, washing of cups, pitchers, bronze vessels, and couches," Mark 7, 3 and 4. Washing was a tradition of men, not a commandment of Scripture. The Jews from Jerusalem didn't seem to know the difference. Verse 1. Then Pharisees and scribes came to Jesus from Jerusalem, saying, "Why do your disciples disobey the tradition of the elders? For they don't wash their hands when they eat bread." He answered them, "Why do you also disobey the commandment of God because of your tradition? For God commanded, 'Honor your father and your mother,' and 'He who speaks evil of father or mother, let him be put to death.' But you say, 'Whoever may tell his father or his mother, whatever help you might otherwise have gotten from me is a gift devoted to God. He shall not honor his father or mother.' You have made the commandment of God void because of your tradition. You hypocrites, well did Isaiah prophesy of you, saying, 'These people draw near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. And in vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrine rules made by men.'" Comment: Jesus drew a sharp distinction between the law of God versus the traditions of men. Washing the body before eating was a tradition of men, which the Pharisees and all the Jews held tightly, but they didn't hold tightly to the law of God, for example, honoring father and mother, Exodus 20:12. The Pharisees constructed a bypass around honoring father or mother, that they allowed someone to tell his parents, "I know you're in financial need and I've got the resources to help you, but I've dedicated them to God." In verse 9, Isaiah predicted it exactly. They were, quote, "teaching as doctrine rules made by men." The most chilling line in the quote from Isaiah was, "In vain do they worship me." God wasn't listening to them or receiving them. We must separate the law of God from the tradition of men, lest God say about us, "In vain do they worship me," teaching as doctrine rules made by men. In verse 9, Jesus finished rebuking the Jews from Jerusalem. Coming up, he immediately warned the crowd about their error. He says it's not how a man eats or what he eats that defiles him, but what comes out of the mouth that defiles him. Verse 10. He summoned the multitude and said to them, "Hear and understand, that which enters into the mouth doesn't defile the man, but that which proceeds out of the mouth, this defiles the man." Then the disciples came and said to him, "Do you know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard this saying?" But he answered, "Every plant which my heavenly Father didn't plant will be uprooted. Leave them alone. They are blind guides of the blind. If the blind guide the blind, both will fall into a pit." Peter answered him, "Explain the parable to us." Comment: Peter didn't understand Jesus when he said that which enters into the mouth doesn't defile the man, but that which proceeds out of the mouth defiles the man. Verse 16. So Jesus said, "Do you also still not understand? Don't you understand that whatever goes into the mouth passes into the belly, then out of the body? But the things which proceed out of the mouth come out of the heart, and they defile the man. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, sexual sins, thefts, false testimony, and blasphemies. These are the things which defile the man, but to eat with unwashed hands doesn't defile the man." Comment: in verse 18, our words come from the heart. In verse 19, our thoughts also come from the heart. If our thoughts and words are wicked, there's something wrong with the heart, and we're defiled. Verse 21. Jesus went out from there and withdrew into the region of Tyre and Sidon. Comment: Jesus has been spending most of his time in Galilee, but he just went north 25 or 30 miles to the foreign Gentile region of Tyre and Sidon. He didn't go there to minister. In fact, he was trying to escape notice, Mark 7:24. But coming up, someone recognized him, verse 22. Behold, a Canaanite woman came out from those borders and cried, saying, "Have mercy on me, Lord, you Son of David. My daughter is severely possessed by a demon." But he answered her not a word. His disciples came and begged him, saying, "Send her away, for she cries after us." But he answered, "I wasn't sent to anyone but the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she came and worshipped him, saying, "Lord, help me." But he answered, "It is not appropriate to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." But she said, "Yes, Lord, but even the dogs eat the crumbs which fall from the master's table." Then Jesus answered her, "Woman, great is your faith. Be it done to you even as you desire." And her daughter was healed from that hour. Comment. In verse 22, a woman came out from those borders, meaning she was a native of the area. In other words, she was a Canaanite, not an Israelite. She was crying out to Jesus about her daughter, for him to heal her from a severe demon. In verse 23, Jesus gave her the silent treatment. He, quote, answered her not a word. This is completely opposite of what he was doing in Israel, where, quote, he healed them all, Matthew 12:15 and Luke 6:19. But as Jesus explained to the disciples in verse 24, the Father sent him to Israelites only. She persisted in verse 25, worshiping, it says. She fell at his feet, Mark 7:25. In verse 26, Jesus still refused her with her at his feet, and amazingly he called her a dog. The NET translation notes smooth it over some, pointing out that the word means pet dog or puppy, which was different from the word for stray or wild dog. So Jesus turned a deaf ear for the time being. And doesn't that seem to be the case for us sometimes, that Jesus turns a deaf ear? But not so. David asked of God, "What is man that you take thought of him, or the son of man that you care for him?" End quote. His point was that in all the universe, man is truly a speck, but amazingly God focuses on us. And David made clear in the next breath that God doesn't think of us on the same plane as a dog, quote, "For you have made man a little lower than the angels and crowned him with glory and honor," Psalm 8, verses 4 and 5. So God does take thought of us and care for us. We're not dogs, and God knows it. He made us to be on a high plane. Therefore, the NET translation notes must be on the right track that Jesus didn't intend to insult the woman when he called her a pet dog. Love is not rude, 1 Corinthians 13:5. In verse 27, humility won the day. The woman said she'd be happy to be a dog in the house of God just so she could eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table. She knew that for Jesus it was nothing to cast out a demon. It was just a token of what he could do. And her daughter was healed from that hour. We should point out that Jesus didn't say it here, but he did say elsewhere that he thought more highly of the woman's region of Tyre and Sidon than he did some of the cities in his own country. He said of cities in Galilee, "Woe to you, Chorazin, woe to you, Bethsaida, for if the miracles had occurred in Tyre and Sidon which occurred in you, they would have repented long ago in sackcloth and ashes," Matthew 11:21. We couldn't call that a compliment, but it does point up the fact that Jesus proclaimed Tyre and Sidon to be superior to those cities in Galilee. Also in Mark, the quote from Jesus to the woman was, "Let the children be satisfied first," meaning it's Israel's chance first, then the time of the Gentiles will come after. It's not time for me to heal any Gentiles yet. Also, with regard to God not holding Israelites superior to the people of other nations, Jesus pointed out that in the time of Elijah there were a lot of starving widows during the famine in Israel, but Elijah was sent only to a certain Canaanite woman in the land of Sidon. And there were many lepers in Israel in the time of Elisha, but Elisha healed only a certain foreigner, a Syrian named Naaman, Luke 4:25 and 26. So there's no partiality with God against foreigners. He even favored them sometimes over Israelites, but his covenant and promises at the time were for Israel, and for the time being Jesus was sticking with the exclusive mission to Israel. Coming up, Jesus returns to Galilee, verse 29. Jesus departed from there and came near to the Sea of Galilee, and he went up into the mountain and sat there. Great multitudes came to him, having with them the lame, blind, mute, maimed, and many others, and they put them down at his feet. He healed them, so that the multitude wondered when they saw the mute speaking, and the injured healed, the lame walking, and the blind seeing, and they glorified the God of Israel. Comment. In verse 29, Jesus returned to Galilee to a deserted mountain, as it says coming up in verse 33, which gives us a clue of why he left Galilee in the first place. The crowds had been unmanageable, Mark 3:20. The multitudes came to him even on the deserted mountain, great multitudes in verse 30. Jesus performed healings right and left, and in verse 31, the crowd wondered or marveled or were amazed. The people were so desperate to get a chance at him, that verse 32. Jesus summoned his disciples and said, "I have compassion on the multitude because they continue with me now 3 days and have nothing to eat. I don't want to send them away fasting, or they might faint on the way." The disciples said to him, "Where should we get so many loaves in a deserted place as to satisfy so great a multitude?" Jesus said to them, "How many loaves do you have?" They said, 7 and a few small fish. He commanded the multitude to sit down on the ground, and he took the 7 loaves and the fish. He gave thanks and broke them and gave to the disciples, and the disciples to the multitudes. They all ate and were filled. They took up 7 baskets full of the broken pieces that were left over. Those who ate were 4,000 men, in addition to women and children. Then he sent away the multitudes, got into the boat, and came into the borders of Magdala. Comment: maybe someone said, "Bet you can't do it again," because in the last chapter he fed 5,000. This time he fed over 4,000 with 7 loaves and a few small fish, and they collected 7 baskets of leftovers. Nobody exactly said, "Bet you can't do it again," but his disciples did say in verse 33, "Where should we get so many loaves in a deserted place as to satisfy so great a multitude?" Somehow they assumed he wouldn't or couldn't do it again. Let's not get caught assuming what he won't do. Matthew 16 is next at landofhavilah.net. Matthew 16.